welcome back to Re Taekwondo Online. We didn't think we'd be here again. It must be about 12 months since we did this last time, so happy anniversary. This set of videos, what we're going to do is go through some basics initially, and then over time work up to patterns, sparring, etc. But initially we're going to start off with some basics. These classes will be short. They'll only be 15 or 20 minutes long. And the idea is that if you're at home working or at home doing school, you can get the YouTube link that I send you each day, turn that on and do a class for a short break to stretch up your body, because that of course helps you with sitting at your desk working, helps the kids with their concentration if they get up and do something. I'll try and do it in a short area, short space. I've got my little carpet here. This carpet's about 5 metres by about sort of 2.5 or 3. So I'll try and stay in an area of about 3 by 3 metres most of the time, so that you can do the same thing at home. We often, when we're training, when we're doing gradings in the dojang or at Action Day, there are certain things we see students doing as instructors, and we always wish that we could sort of take that bit of extra time to help you with your technique. This is one opportunity where I'm going to do that. I'm going to try and just zero in on common faults that instructors see with students whenever I'm teaching something. You'll note I've got my lines on the ground here. These lines are pretty much shoulder width. If you look at where my feet are, they're about the width of my shoulders, give or take a little bit. When we talk about shoulder width, of course, that's not shoulder width. That's not shoulder width. This is approximately shoulder width. So you'll hear me discussing that quite a lot as things go on. Now, what I want you to do is, for each of these, do your own warm-up. And your warm-up might be as simple as jog up and down your car, your driveway at home, jog across the room, or just jog on the spot, just lifting your feet backwards like this, just to get your hamstrings warm. Just do a minute or two of warm-up, and I'll always start with some stretching. If we're doing arm work, I'll work on shoulders. If we're doing leg work, I'll stretch up the legs. Let's just sit down and stretch a little bit while we talk. So I'm going to start with a butterfly stretch, pulling my feet in and pushing my knees down. With the current lockdowns, today's the 1st of September. With the current lockdowns, it looks like it could be quite a while until we get to train in our normal sized groups again. The Delta variant of COVID has got the governments running scared, so I think things could move quite slowly. So I'll endeavour to do a class every day, just a little short 15 or 20 minute class for you, just changing the feet wide apart. A little short 15 or 20 minute class for you, just to get you going. Today's class is stances, so making sure that we stand correctly. The most important thing about footwork, about stances, is that your footwork is the foundation that you deliver your technique from. If you're attached to the ground poorly, your technique will lack power because you can't drive through your core. Remember, power comes from our core, and your feet attached to the ground, your upper body is working, and so your core needs to be able to lever off your feet off the ground. If you're kicking, then your non-kicking foot has to be well attached to the ground so that you can again lever off the ground and deliver power. A friend of mine used to say to me that we draw our power from the ground, and I think that's probably a very good way of looking at it. Okay, it's just a nice little simple stretch. We're not doing too much today, so not too much stretching required. Just going to start off just with a few definitions, basic definitions of stances. Parallel stance. See my feet pointing directly at you. My feet are parallel, which means the same as these lines, they're drawing lines that will never meet. When I turn side on, you can see my feet are directly forwards and backwards. Often I see students standing like this with their toes out. Now if you think about that, if I turn sideways, there's my feet straight, and they're as long as possible. If I turn them sideways, my platform is shorter. Turn it all the way out, and now it's like standing on a tightrope. I'm unstable, I want to fall over. The same, if I go toes in, like this, similarly, toes in too far, I've shortened my platform, and it means that as I try and do things, I've got I'm not rooted to the ground well. So when we do parallel stance, feet parallel, parallel. So this is parallel stance. Front on. For chumbi, to turn it into a ready stance, hands in fists to your belt, just either side of your belt, and just slightly relax the knees. So side on, this is tall and straight. And if I just put a little flex in my knees, they've now got some bounce in them. Now my legs are ready to work. From here I can move quickly into any other stance. So this is our chumbi stance in parallel. If I talk about side stance, if I'm sparring with you and I go into side stance, which I do every now and then to deliver some techniques, I'm in parallel stance, side on. This is a side stance. I consider this as being a temporary or momentary stance because my knee is exposed. You can hit me there and I'm in deep trouble. So we might be sparring and I might move into side stance to then come into a step and attack. So parallel stance. That's one shoulder width apart. Let's go 2 shoulder widths apart, another half each side of my lines. Now I'm in horse riding stance. From here, there's straight legs. My legs are locked. If I sit, imagine there's a stool behind me, and I sit and push my knees out, now I've got horse riding stance. So I don't want to do this. This is incorrect. Stand up tall, push your knees out and sit. Now we're in a nice horse riding stance. Side on, again tall, double shoulder width, knees going out and sit. Now look where my nose is. I'm going to bring my nose over my toes. That's about right there, just a very, very slight forward bend, minute forward bend. If I'm backwards, I'm poorly balanced. I can feel the weight on my heels. If I come into a nice nose over toes, I can lift my heels off the ground and remain balanced. So there is our horse riding stance. Horse riding stance. Next we'll look at closed stance. This is one that turns up at the start of one ho. Feet together, toes and heels touching. One ho hyang. This is your closed stance. Appears in Twege hyang. Come up onto the toes, down into closed stance. Nice and simple. Knees just ever so lightly flexed. Knees are never rigid, they're just ever so lightly flexed. And there's my closed stance. Now let's have a look at back stance. Here's one of my lines here, this tape that I've got, it's about 2 or 3 centimetres wide. And if I put my right heel so that the back of it's touching the line, and I'll put my left foot so that it's touching the other side of the line. So if I just put my knees apart for you for a second, you can see the line running between my feet. This is how it should be done. You should have a slight gap. So in a regular back stance, my feet have that slight gap between them. If I'm moving forwards, there's my gap. Turn that foot out, come forwards, and there I am, almost on the line, but I'm leaving the gap. What I won't do is cross over here, because then this foot here has to come around the other leg. If I leave a gap, as this foot moves forwards, it can move in a straight line, which is important. So back stance, very simple as far as the gap goes. Let's have a look at the knees. This is one that people get wrong sometimes. Here's my parallel stance. Go out about another half of half, approximately. Turn my foot. Here I'm nice and tall. Now I'm just going to sit. And when I sit, let's have a look. Here's my hip bone. There's my knee. There's my middle toe. They're roughly lined up. Roughly lined up. If I dropped a plumb line down there, it would be straight. That knee's bent over the toes. This knee's bent over the toes. So my belt runs, as you can see, down the back of my leg. Watch what happens as I move the weight forwards. The belt moves off the back leg. So this is quite nice. Belt running down the inside of the back leg is pretty much correct. If you look here, this is what I call a ski jump. You can see that little slope there. So we don't want a ski jump that you could ride up on a motorbike or a ski. You just want to come back here like this. So hip, knee, toe, belt down the centre. If I run towards you now with my stance, thing. Not too much bend in the rear knee. Very important. Otherwise, I'm overly committed on the back knee. So that knee is I've got a lot of weight on that back knee. Stand up tall, sit, and it's perfect every time. If you're not sure with your back stance, stand nice and tall. Body's at 45 degrees, so my body is going to 45. And then I'm just going to sit. And there it is, that's really comfortable. I've got this front foot lightly weighted. I've got the rear foot with about 70%, front foot about 30, which means that at any time, I can pick up my front foot and use it. That's why we have more weight on the back foot than the front. So, back stance, nice and simple. Don't go for the big slope there. Stand tall, you must start shoulder width, add half, turn, sit. Belt down the inside of the back leg, body at 45 degrees. Not side on, not front on. Because remember, I'm front on to you, big target. Side on, or 45 degrees, small target. So we've had a look at back stance. Let's have a look at front stance or walking stance. You might hear either name, walking stance, front stance. Different regions use different names. Start with shoulder width. This is the most commonly poorly done stance that we see. I'm going to step my left foot on the line. As I do, that rear foot will turn to about 45 degrees, no more than 45, just 45. So turn the foot, this foot will come across outside the line and step out onto the line. So just again, the foot's turned, I'm going to cross that line and shoot back out to shoulder width. So here, shoulder width. Now let's see how I've landed. My front knee is bent straight towards you. My back knee is straight. My front toes are pointing to you. My back toes are pointing 45 degrees. Let's just look at why we do this. That's safe. You can hit that. It'll hurt, but you're not going to bust my knee. This one here is straight, and I've got a 45 degree foot, because now my calf muscle can fire. So to move forwards, I can shoot off. If I turn that foot all the way backwards, I've got it pointing back there now, and I try and push off, I can't use my calf muscle at all. I've got to heft my leg forwards. And that's why your instructor always says to you, 45 degrees with the rear foot, because it gives you the ability to drive off your calf muscle, as you can see I'm doing now. Where should I be pointing? My body towards you. You'll often hear me say, point your belly button to me. There's my belly button pointing to you. If I'm doing a punch, I'll be pointing to you. If I'm doing, say, a low section block, I'll have my body slightly, ever so slightly, angled off. Ever so slightly. Because that allows for a big pullback here with my spare hand. So if it was a punch, we finish square across. If it's a block, we finish ever so slightly off square. So square means I'm straight across the room to you. Straight across is square. And then angled, slightly angled. So square, angled. So front stance, again, coming from the back here. The way we move the feet. Turn the foot out, across, shoot out. As I move forwards, that foot will turn. So drive off, the hips are turned out, I come just outside the line and forwards again. And so that's moving forwards in front stance. Now, when I do techniques, I'll look more at correct use of the hip, because it varies slightly depending on the kind of technique you're doing. But that crescent-shaped motion, the crescent-shaped motion is really important, because it allows you to engage the hip. And I'll be talking about that a lot as we're doing our techniques. So we've had a look at back stance, front stance, side, parallel, closed. Let's have a look at fixed back stance. Just jumping back again. Here's our back stance, shoulder width, add half, turn the foot, sit. There's our regular back stance. Fixed back stance is, rather than 70%, 30%, is 50-50. Lengthen it ever so slightly. Just from here, lengthen it ever so slightly, come to 50-50, and sit low. Now my belt is roughly in the middle. It's not quite, but roughly. This is a lower, deeper, stronger stance. I'm really not in a position now to use my front leg. Regular back stance, my front foot is light. Here, it's not. Here I'm really rooted to the ground hard. If I was doing tug of war, I'd go into fixed back stance, or even longer fixed back stance if I want to do tug of war, because now I'm really super stable. If I want to spar, I'll go into a little short back stance. Talk more about that just in a minute. So, back stance, 70-30, there's the belt. Increase slightly, 50-50, drop, fixed back stance, strong. Where does that appear? In this pattern here, which is one ho hyung, 6-cut pattern. Fixed back stance, 50-50, deep and strong. Let's have a look now at another stance that you'll get, a couple of unusual ones that don't appear too much. There's one that I'll teach you that only appears in one pattern of the colour belt patterns. Let's have a look first at another momentary stance called bending ready stance. So bending ready stance, if you're doing one ho or a couple of other patterns, you'll do a check. Off the check, you'll come into a bending ready stance. So bending ready stance is this. The leg that's on the ground flexes back. The foot comes up and sits pointing at you. So I don't point it to the ground, I point it at you and I rest it on my knee. When I say it's a momentary stance, I'm not going to spar you like this because you're just going to bust my leg. It's a stance that you use in between moves. As with one ho, I check, bending stance, shoot out my kick. So it's a momentary stance, you don't hold it, you are there to load up, you bend the leg, you load up and you shoot out hard. And that's what bending ready stance does. It appears in a number of the colour belt patterns. Next one I want to talk about is called vertical stance. So stand pretty much in chumbi, parallel stance, and just turn one foot out. Now, drop your knees ever so slightly. That looks like a short back stance, doesn't it? Here's back stance. Here's vertical stance. My feet are almost together. There's about a half a foot width, 3/4 of a foot width between them. And just flex. When you're doing one ho hyung, you're here, or you're here. These are the two times that we use this particular stance, vertical stance, in colour belt patterns. For those of you who are not up to second cut pattern yet, you won't be familiar with that stance. Vertical stance, again, is a momentary stance. You're not going to stand there in this stance because the knees are almost straight. They're only just bent just a tiny bit. It's not a very athletic stance, it's a momentary stance in between moves. And it gets you tall. Now, just to put a few things together, let's just put back stance together with our hands so that we're in a guarding position. Now this is important. Often when we're sparring or doing anything, people go from chumbi and will say left leg forward guarding, they'll come to here. And there they are in their guard. What's wrong with that? You use a guarding block. So guarding block means the hands come back behind the body, my front foot's turned out, and this foot here is going to go across in that crescent movement and move out. So from here, see my hips are fully turned and I shoot out the block hard. So now I'm in guarding and I arrive in guarding using guarding block. Guarding block. Someone might be coming towards me, reaching out to grab or strike or whatever. My hands have come back and I've done the equivalent of an outer forearm block with this hand here, and this hand here is moved into position to be able to do something. So guarding block. Back stance, guarding block. So that's an important one. From this position here, just remember, don't do this. This is incorrect. Come to here, hands behind, and then shoot them out. And there I am. Now let's look at where my hands have landed. This hand here, I'll come closer to the camera for you. Here's my belt. Here's my solar plexus where my rib cage comes together. Solar plexus is the problem area. You hit me there, it's going to hurt. So I'll put my hand just below my solar plexus right there. Other hand in front of my face. I'll discuss that shortly. This hand here is a fist width off my body. Fist width off my body, this high. Back in the old days, they used to guard very high. They guarded like this. Let this area free. Masteries change it slightly these days, and we guard lower. We're guarding down. Just above the belt is where this bottom hand is. It's not here. Not here. There's the danger area. It's here, off the body. Other hand, knuckles shoulder height. Elbow bent about 90 degrees approximately. If I'm looking directly at you, you're the person who's threatening me. When my hands come out, my hand, my fist, this one here, is directly between me and you. And now you can see my nose directly at you, and you can see both of my ears. If I do this, show you one ear, I'm only showing you one eye. Problem with that, I can't judge distance. Our eyes work in stereo. So you turn both ears to your opponent, nose to your opponent, both eyes focusing on your opponent, shoulders relaxed, relaxed. Now, looking at you over my hand, I'm in a position where you've got to come through this to get to my face. You've got to come through this to get to my body. So I can block, I can block, I can block. At any time, you've got to come through this one or through this one. That's why they sit where they sit. So there's a few basic stances for you. Now, when you're doing basic technique, you use basic footwork. When you spar, it's a little bit different. If you're not sure, just spar in back stance. If you don't know what to do and you're free sparring, just spar in back stance, move around, spar in strong back stance. As you get more experienced, you change to a slightly lighter fighting stance. Here's your back stance. I'm going to shorten it up slightly and turn that back foot ever so slightly around. Now I'm in a little sparring stance. I'm just a little bit shorter. The back foot's turned ever so slightly. It's not front on, ever so slightly. Now I'm in this position where I can move around the floor quite quickly. So if I shorten it up, I'm really mobile. I'm still loose in the knees, loose in the body, nice and flexed, but I can move. From here, I can very quickly kick. From here, I can use this leg. I can change up, do whatever I want to do. If a punch or something comes to me, I can move to the side very quickly. Or if I want to block, again, to the side very quickly. That short, relaxed stance is a really good sparring stance. So just to review, parallel, at half, turn, back stance. Come back ever so slightly, turn the rear foot slightly. Now we're in this nice little sparring stance. Still got a gap down the middle, still a little 3-finger width gap or so down the middle. Super short, super light. And we're in a really good sparring stance now. The hands will always remain here, always remain here. If I move up into boxing range, where we're really close and we start to throw punches, my hands might come up towards boxing position. But while I'm back in your leg range, this hand's going to stay here because I want to be able to very quickly block a body kick. So move up and close, back into that further out range for leg range. So just thinking about stances, we've got our basic stances, we've got our sparring stance. There's others that you'll learn as you go along, and you'll come to understand, as a junior student, you'll come to understand over time why you see seniors using different footwork that you might not quite know where it comes from. As I talked about side stance, we're sparring and I'm throwing kicks at you and we're moving around, and then you might see me throw a kick and then move into a side stance. The reason I might do that, just here, that side stance, is that now I can shoot out a different style of kick. I can step behind, or I can shuffle into a different type of technique, forwards or backwards. So footwork is a really important thing. Always remember, the stance you use in basic technique must be strong. The knees must be slightly flexed and the shoulders should be relaxed. Try not to have massive shoulder tension, straight knees, because now for me to move, to do anything, I've got to relax first, then move. But if I'm relaxed and loose, now I can move. if you've done sparring where I've been running the session, you'll always hear me saying to you, dance around with your opponent, or bop and move, bop and move. Because if you're bopping and moving, you're staying loose. You're just staying nice and loose and bopping. If you're tense when you spar, everything's slow. Your attack is slow and your defence is slow. The other thing, breathe. Always breathe. Keep your breathing going all the time. Make the effort to suck air in. And that way, while you're doing things, you'll always have oxygenated muscles. Your mind will be oxygenated so that it can focus, and you will be able to move quickly into your next technique because you're not holding your breath and tensing your body. Now that's our class for today. A little bit longer because I wanted to go through some of these things very carefully. So what I'd like you to do is just spend a few minutes going through those stances. If you like, wind back to the start, have another go, and just work on the footwork. If you've got some tape, lay out 2 lines of tape on the carpet. It's not going to mark the carpet. Lay out 2 lines of tape on the carpet and just practice the basics. So here was my back stance from here. Turn, across, turn, across, turn, across. You can see the slight crescent motion. My front stance from Chumbi, foot turned, out, turned, out, turned, out. Nice and simple. Work through those, and as we go through our basic techniques, I'll keep mentioning stances, but I'll keep it nice and simple. All right, have a good day, do your class, and I'll see you all tomorrow.